On June 11th, 1981, Issei Sagawa lured a 25-year-old Dutch woman named Renee Hartevelt to his apartment. She came under the pretense that she would be recording a German poem Issei liked. He had feigned an interest in learning German to get closer to her, but when she arrived on this night, it would be her last. After months of building up courage, Issei was ready to do what he had fantasized about since the first time he saw her. As she was preoccupied reading a German poem, Issei moved over to a cupboard behind her, took out a .22 caliber rifle, and aimed at the back of her neck. This was not the first time he had done this, but before now, he had always hesitated before pulling the trigger. This time, there was no hesitation. Issei Sagawa was born on April 26, 1949, in the capital city of Hyogo Prefecture, Kobe, Japan. He was born to Akira Sagawa, a very successful and wealthy businessman. Issei was born prematurely, but recovered soon after. This did, however, have an effect on the rest of his life, with him remaining small and frail up into adulthood. This contributed to Issei having a poor self-image, seeing himself as weak and ugly. He kept to himself and preferred to read books rather than play with other children. There's another crucial piece of information that has been mostly overlooked by the media. We even have access to the Sagawa family home movies, which contain foreshadowing and reference to what Issei would become. The home movies depict a New Year pantomime where the two little boys, Issei and his brother, are attacked by a cannibal giant portrayed by the boy's uncle. Their father would protect them but would always be bested by the giant, first blinded, then stabbed. The giant would then scoop up the boys and boil them in a pot, planning to eat them. This no doubt left an impression on Issei, probably contributing to his dark fantasies later in life. He first experienced cannibalistic desires at age 7 after seeing a boy's thigh. He even engaged in bestiality with his dog at a very young age, due to sex being a very taboo topic back then. Eventually, his fantasies started to involve strangling and killing women, and he had difficulty becoming aroused without the thought of violence. To Sagawa's credit, he knew this was wrong and sought out professional help. He called a psychiatrist, but was told he would have to come in person to discuss more, which Sagawa was too embarrassed to do. He instead confided in his brother, who passed it off as a joke and ultimately ignored Issei's issues. Becoming increasingly isolated, Sagawa's fantasies turned into an obligation. Issei began attending Wako University in Machida, Tokyo, Japan. At the age of 24, while attending this university, he followed a German woman to her home and broke into her apartment while she was sleeping. He planned to hit her in the head and knock her out with an umbrella, then cut into her buttocks and eat it. As he snuck by her, his knees touched her belly, at which point she woke up and pushed him away. He was captured by police and charged with attempted rape, saying nothing about what he had planned to do. The charges were apparently dropped after his wealthy father paid a settlement to the victim. After finishing his graduate program, Issei took a trip to Greece. He traveled there by boat and ended up meeting a butcher who he described as fat and jolly. The man taught Issei how to butcher meat, a skill he would put to use later on. On April 26, 1977, Sagawa's 28th birthday, he moved to Paris to pursue a PhD at Sorbonne University. He was still a virgin at this time, perhaps contributing to his obsessions being stronger than ever. Nearly every night, Issei would bring a prostitute home in hopes of killing and eating them, but every time he froze up and couldn't pull the trigger. A few years later, in 1981, when Sagawa was 32, he saw a girl in his class named Renee Hartevelt. She was a Dutch woman who Sagawa described as beautiful, saying he'd never seen a woman like her before. He became obsessed with her, envying her strength, height, and looks. One day, he was traveling home on the metro and saw Renee. He sat next to her and struck up a conversation about their studies. Little did she know, he fantasized about eating her. This was an important interaction between them because it changed their relationship from just classmates to acquaintances, building trust between them. He waited for their next lecture together. And after it was over, some of the class, including Sagawa, decided to go out for a meal at a Greek restaurant. Renee asked to join them, leaving Sagawa completely ecstatic. After a few more outings with her and study sessions together, he had gained her trust. Renee was able to speak 3 languages, French, German, and English. She expressed to Sagawa that she didn't have the best financial situation. Sagawa, who had a wealthy father, feigned interest in learning German so that she could tutor him. She accepted. and on June 11th, she met with Sagawa at his home for dinner and tutoring. He apparently told her that he loved her and wanted to have sex with her. She denied, saying she only wanted to be friends. Sagawa seemingly accepted this, but while she was reading, he grabbed his gun and shot her in the back of the neck. Sagawa supposedly passed out after shooting her, regaining consciousness soon after. What follows is truly disturbing, so if you are sensitive to things like this, skip to this timestamp. His first course of action was to try biting into her right buttock, but not the left, claiming it was closer to the heart and there would be more blood. His teeth were not sharp enough to bite into her skin, so he tried using a fruit knife, but that didn't work either. He went to the market to buy a curved meat knife. He ate various parts of her body, some cooked, some raw, and saved other parts in the fridge. He took photos of her body at each stage of eating her, while also engaging in sex acts with her body. And now with her corpse lying in a pool of blood on his apartment floor, he moved her body into his shower, where he ran the cold tap and began savagely dismembering her body. Sagawa expressed revulsion towards this process, claiming it was not pleasurable for him. This is interesting to note, seeing as how he never acted on his desires again. It seems most sexual psychopaths take gratification from mutilating their victims' bodies and would be drawn to do it again, but this was not the case for Issei. Over the next few days, he left his apartment to get rid of her clothing, though he kept her trousers in his possession, likely as a trophy in which he could relive his crime. After her body started decomposing, Issei knew he had to get rid of it. He purchased 2 suitcases, which he fit her dismembered body parts into, wrapping them in bed sheets. To keep up appearances, he even went out with friends to the cinema, while a decomposing body rotted in his apartment. He planned to dispose of the body in a lake in Bois de Boulogne Park. He used a cab to transport the suitcases, and when the driver picked them up to put them in his trunk, he joked about there being a corpse in them due to how heavy it was. If only he knew how right he was. But Issei told him they were just books. Upon arriving at the park, he struggled to carry the suitcases down to the lake. This didn't go unnoticed by a couple enjoying their evening in the park. Issei apparently noticed them watching and tried to discard the suitcases in a bush. This being suspicious prompted the man who saw him to check inside one of the suitcases. He asked Issei if they were his, and when Issei told him no, he opened the bag, revealing body parts wrapped in bed sheets. He yelled out "murderer" to his wife nearby. Issei quickly fled the scene. Police talked to the couple who found the suitcases. Sagawa had a distinct appearance, seeing as how he was a very short Asian man in Paris. The couple also saw him exiting the taxi with the suitcases. The police began contacting every taxi firm in Paris, and 4 days later, a driver came forward. He remembered Sagawa. He also remembered the building he picked him up from, an apartment building that housed just one Asian man. They'd got him. Sagawa was held for just 2 years while awaiting trial, but was deemed legally insane and unfit to stand trial. He was sent to a mental institution indefinitely. This upset the French public because he was being held at their expense. Sagawa was then deported back to Japan. The Japanese psychologist declared him sane, saying instead that he had a personality disorder. The charges against him in France had been dropped, so he could not be detained in Japan. He was released from the hospital on August 12, 1986, just 5 years after killing, raping, and eating a young woman. Unable to find a job back in Japan, Sagawa resorted to writing about his crime and appearing in interviews. He wrote a book about his own crime, even showcasing the sickening crime scene photos. Despite the horrible topic of the book, it was somehow still published. At age 63, he stated that he now feels an appetite for Japanese women and has graduated from Western women. He calls the Japanese women delicious, showing that he still had cravings to eat young girls. Yet, he would not act on this, stating that he was so sickened by the reality of his crime that he would never do it again. Then, on November 24th, 2022, less than 1 year ago at the time of this video being recorded, Issei Sagawa died due to pneumonia complications, ridding the world of this truly disturbing cannibal.